Welcome into the Inside Scoop. I am your host, Josh Newberg. We are live from Nashville, Tennessee, and today is Wednesday, June 11th, and we have, well, I was going to say we have a big visit weekend ahead, but the word big visit doesn't even do it justice. I mean, some of these teams are having upwards of 24 elite recruits on campus for official visits, so don't worry, we're going to break it all down, tell you what it means today, but before we get into it, do me a favor, hit subscribe to the best recruiting channel on all of YouTube, the On3 Recruits channel. So, what are we talking about today? We're going to go deep dive into Texas Longhorn Big Visit Weekend, Michigan. We're going to take a look at this Bo Bentley recruitment. Will be Oklahoma or LSU. He's down to just 2. He's taking visits to both, so it sounds like a decision is coming soon. We got Mike Singer from our Notre Dame site, so it's a loaded show. Let's get into it. We gotta talk Texas recruiting because this weekend there's 27 official visitors. Justin Wells from Inside Texas. 10 of these guys are inside the top 100. So you're talking the top 1% of 1% of athletes in America. So how does Texas manage 27 official visitors all in the same weekend?
Very carefully. Listen, you know, it's funny because we talked to a lot of these guys, coaches and assistants and staffers behind the scenes, sourcing, things of that sort. And it's a grind. It is really, this official visit window has really turned into a grind, not just for the players and the parents, prospects and that stuff, but for the coaches, for the staff. I mean, you're literally glued to the campus focusing on recruiting nonstop for an entire month. And so Texas tries to spread this out a little bit. Last weekend, they hosted, I want to say, between 10 and 12, winded up getting 4 commitments out of that, which was a little bit of a surprise because we know that Sarkisian doesn't really push. Of course, a couple of those were specialists. So Jeff Banks lined his guys up. That was the shoot your shot weekend last year. Lamar Brown, Xavier Crowell,
right?
Some of those big names. This weekend there's going to be guys where I think Texas is in really, really good position with to close. They've hit a home run on a lot of these guys. They're just waiting for the closer to come in and get the final 3 outs. And the way they manage it is I think they space that out because they have one more the following weekend. They're only doing 3 this entire year, while other schools may host as many as 4, 5, and 6 official visit weekends. Texas is very strategic with how they kind of narrow this thing down. This weekend are going to be a bunch of guys that Texas is in a great spot for that I think they want to just build on that. You're talking about Felix Ojo. You're talking about Zayden Crimpin. You're talking about Vodney Cleveland, Jalen Lott, Xavier Griffin, Dre Quinn. These are all guys that had been to Texas before. Texas feels like they're in a pretty good spot with most of them. And now you get to the nut cutting and figuring out everything, get those final questions answered before they go on to – a lot of these guys have decisions coming up in late June, early July, late July. And so Texas is really good about this. They're efficient about this. They don't just bring in guys to bring in official visitors. They are very strategic with this, and I think that's what helps them manage this craziness in this window.
Could we see a 5-star commitment this weekend? And
Yes.
I'm looking
Yes.
at Felix Ojo. That's
Yes.
the one I'm looking at. Coming off that visit to Michigan, he's taken a couple other trips. I know he wants to make a summer decision. He hasn't exactly put a date down yet, but could this be one of those official visit commitments?
Yes, actually, and you nailed it. Felix Ojo is the guy that we feel like is really trending to Texas. Look, he's been trending to Texas for months now, but Felix wanted to be thorough. He wanted to, enjoy the official visit process, this part of recruiting where you do get to go get wined and dined and get red carpet and all that fun stuff for a couple of days, rack up on a bunch of gear that you wind up giving to your teammates in high school and your friends and your family. Felix wanted to be thorough. Ohio State, Michigan, they were all in the mix. He was supposed to see Oklahoma in 2 weeks, but he decided to cancel that because he doesn't feel the need to even make that trip to Norman anymore. This will be his last official visit. And I think with him being the priority offensive tackle, him being the franchise left tackle specifically, this is big for Felix and this is big for Texas. I think they have been incredible. He snuck on campus for an unofficial back in April to watch a spring practice scrimmage type situation by himself, just to hang out with the offensive lineman, hang out with Kyle Flood. This kid has loved Texas for a while now. I think they really hit a home run. You know, this kid was looking for an offer 2 summers ago when he came in an elite camp at 6'6", 6'7". Now he's the priority left tackle. They have been building ever since. He came in on junior day. They absolutely killed that visit as well. I think the family and everybody is aligned with Texas. I'm not saying it's going to happen this weekend, but I'm saying if a 5-star were to pop, I feel very comfortable that it would be Felix Ojo.
All right. Now, you mentioned that last weekend you felt like the guys they had on campus were maybe a bit of a long shot and guys that they were taking a big swing at. But this weekend, 5-star linebacker Xavier Griffin's on campus. Do you not put him in kind of that same category? Or do you think Texas is more of a player for a prospect like Griffin?
Before his unofficial trip, before he decommitted from USC, I would have had him in the first weekend. He would have been a shoot your shot type guy. But as soon as he decided he wanted to see a few more schools and USC decided they weren't fond of that, and Griffin was like, peace. Then it got real because Lyle and Clark had already had a previous relationship with Griffin, and now they're only building on that. I know he's listed at linebacker, but Texas sees him as an edge. And I think if you've seen his body and you've seen his film, that's probably where he projects best. He's 6'4", maybe 205 pounds. He's got size 16 shoe. He's 16 years old. Like, he's probably an edge. But Texas has done really well in this recruitment. The problem with that one is that so has Alabama, and so has Georgia. And so I think others, because he is an elite guy. And so Texas is in a better position with him because he took that unofficial in April. Him and his mom were there for a day and a half. They saw the scenes. They really, really enjoyed that trip. Alan Clark, again, the new edge coach they took from Ohio State, has been paying dividends on the recruiting trail. And I think this is a relationship with him and Griffin that they feel like they're in a good spot to get in there and get in the mix. They're not afraid to battle anybody in this cycle, Josh. They'll go toe-to-toe with anyone, and they know Alabama looks really good in that recruitment. They know Georgia's, the in-state school, looks really good in that recruitment. But Texas feels like they've got an in there, and they're going to try to maximize that this weekend.
All right, Texas starting to load up on that defensive line class, picked up a commitment this week. And this weekend, speaking of Alabama, they got Rodney Cleveland coming on campus, 6'2.5", 305 pounds out of Birmingham, Alabama, top 150 player overall. Who do you think is the biggest competition heading into this? Because the RPM favors Florida Gators. Inside Scoop listeners, I got to tell you about a company that makes this show possible. It's Rhoback Activewear. The only way to describe Rhoback is best fit, best feel. And for those who are not familiar with Rhoback, they are completely changing the game with their incredibly comfortable activewear. Rhoback has released so many items within their new licensed game day collection, and it's our favorite. With novel polo designs, clean hoodie, and quarter zip designs from some of your favorite schools, it's definitely worth checking out. Nobody else in the market is pairing these level of custom designs with this quality of activewear. Rhoback's everyday shorts or their Delta Performance pants are the perfect pairing as well. They are both super comfortable. They have an elastic waistband and a great fabric that is made to have the appearance of a nice short look, but the comfort for everyday movement. Rhoback also has been proudly leading the NIL charge, having signed partnerships with multiple college football stars, past and present, and are becoming the go-to brand for college athletes across the country. So use code JOSH on Rhoback.com for a generous 20% off all new custom orders through the end of this week. Let's spell it out for you. RHOBACK.com. That's 20% off all performance polos, shorts, and more with promo code JOSH right now.
Absolutely. I went to see Vodney a couple of weeks ago in Parker High School, and when I left there, I felt like Texas had a slight lead, and I thought Florida was a hair behind, and I knew Florida had the official visit coming up. And that official visit did exactly what Florida needed to do. It solidified their spot with Vodney. They are squarely in it. I think this is going to come down to Texas and Florida. I think this is one of those two recruitments, one of those types of pursuits. And so I think Florida kind of has the lead now. And that's natural coming off the post-OV high. He'd been recruited by Florida long before Texas jumped into the mix. And so I think now they have probably nudged ahead. And I checked with him earlier a couple days ago. I said, Vodney, I know Florida did a great job. You still set to come in and visit? Because remember, I was checking on Jarraylen McCoy, who had told me coincidentally he had canceled his visit because we knew that was a Texas-Florida battle as well, and him and Vodney were good friends. And so I wanted to make sure it was good with Vodney, and he said, I am more than locked in. I am so ready to see Texas. Look, Kenny Baker, the defensive line coach, has picked this recruitment up and just coddled it. He has been to Birmingham multiple times. He has gone to see Vodney. He has gotten close to his family. And just getting to know Vodney like I have, I think the Horns are really, really there in it. I do think Florida has that advantage. And like you asked me, who's going to be that top competition? I know Miami was throwing haymakers out there for a second at him. And I know Georgia was kind of flirting with him as well. But this is a Texas-Florida recruitment. The biggest key this weekend is going to be, can Texas match what the Gators did last weekend? Because if they can, I think they can get that small edge back. And then, like Vodney told me, he's got a decision coming in mid to late June. That could be at the end of this OV. I think Vodney kind of knows where he wants to go. I think he's just checking boxes to make sure because remember, he's already made one commitment before to Alabama and decommitted. He doesn't want to do that again. I don't see that in his sights. He's going to make a decision, I think, fairly quickly after this official visit. That's how important getting him on campus this weekend is.
All right, let's wrap this up with two in-state prospects we got to hit on before we get out of here. We're talking athlete Jalen Lott and interior offensive lineman Zayden Crimpen. Is it possible Texas could finish out these recruitments this weekend?
I think they can. I think they possibly can with Zayden Crimpen. Now, it looked like that was going to be a Texas LSU battle. He went down to Baton Rouge for his official, I believe, a couple weekends ago. He had a lot of fun. I don't know how much of a priority he is for the Tigers, but I know they really like him. And you're talking about a guy that can play all 5 spots on the offensive line. I know he's labeled as an interior lineman. Zayden Crimpen could play left tackle tomorrow. He could play right tackle. He could play center. That he could be the center take in this cycle. He is that important for Kyle Flood and the Horns. That A&M OV last weekend opened his eyes. They shook the trees and there were some peaches there. And so he really enjoyed that. But I think Texas can get closer with Zayden to where he's going to get closer to his decision. I really like that there. I think Jalen Lott's going to stick to his July 4th timeline. I don't think we're going to see any movement from him because remember, he still has one more OV after this Texas one, and that's Oregon, who was probably the top competition for the Horns. I had posted a story on Jalen. I talked to him actually this morning and posted some quotes from him. One of the biggest takeaways for me was that Texas not only says you can play wide receiver or cornerback, we're going to let you, choose. He's also going to run track at Texas. And that is something that had been discussed over the last 6 months, but nothing had been really finalized. Lott told me this morning Texas very much wants him to compete on the track team. Same thing his father did, who's in the UT Hall of Fame, James Lott. And so I think with Crimpen, I think Texas could close it this weekend. I think they're going to have to push away kind of some of that momentum A&M has. But I just think Kyle Flood has prioritized Crimpen to the point that he knows he's that important to this class. Like I said, he could be the center that really, galvanizes this whole O-line group who could potentially be the best in the country by the time signing day comes. And so Jalen Lott's, I think, going to stick to that July 4th one a little bit more. I still love where Texas sits with him, but I'll know even more after this OV and when he comes back from Eugene in a week and a half.
All right. Can't wait to see the returns on this weekend. Stay locked to Inside Texas for all the details. We're talking Michigan recruiting. We have E.J. Holland from the Wolverine on, and we're going to get to this big visit weekend. But I want to start by talking about Michigan beating up on Notre Dame on the recruiting trail. Kind of a nice start to summer for Michigan fans, huh?
Yeah, no, definitely. Always great when you can beat up on Notre Dame. I mean, they straight up lockered the Irish this week, back-to-back days, beating them out for Mikhail Blade on 300 edge out of Chicago, and then Alistair Vallejo, a top priority defensive lineman out of Texas. These were 2 recruitments where Notre Dame was considered the leader for the majority of the process. Michigan came back and, like I said, just straight up stuffed Marcus Freeman into a locker, which was great to see. Notre Dame always starts off hot and then they cool off as the recruiting process goes down. It's the exact opposite for Michigan. They get off to a slow start. It can be frustrating. And then they come back and they have big summer wins. They close strong. You saw that last cycle
Yeah.
finishing in the top 10. I don't think Notre Dame did. So, I think with Michigan, there's no reason moving forward that they shouldn't continue to beat out Notre Dame. In my opinion, it's the superior program. And also, Michigan is readjusting how they're approaching NIL on the recruiting trail with the House settlement officially agreed on. So I think that, again, Michigan should continue to beat out Notre Dame. They showed that this week. Mikhail Blade, longtime lean. Sharon Moore personally did a fantastic job of winning him over. And then Alistair Vallejo, I mean, he visited Notre Dame this month, didn't make it to Michigan. The last time he visited Michigan was in the spring when he got the offer on campus, and still Michigan was able to come away with a win. So now that they're talking rev share, that they're talking NIL again, I think Michigan is very well positioned to win in this era, not just against Notre Dame, but against other, blue bloods. I think that they have a great plan for what they want to do with rev share, roster retention, transfer portal, recruiting, and they'll also, get their collective involved for those elite recruitments. So yeah, big week for Michigan. They're starting to build up some momentum, and I think this will carry forward the rest of summer.
Yeah, so looking at some of these big name visitors, we got to start with the number one running back in America, Savion Hyder. He's fresh off this visit to UGA. He's also been to Tennessee and Ohio State, and it seems like at one point Michigan was the team to beat. Do you still view Michigan as the team to beat heading into this weekend?
I mean, it really does depend on this weekend. I wouldn't say that I view Tennessee as the team to beat. I wouldn't say that I view Michigan as the team to beat either. I don't think I view either one, just because these visits will be so critical. I mean, he visits Michigan this weekend, and then he goes to Tennessee the following weekend. I think Ohio State did a nice job in the spring, but I agree with Steve Wilfong and have continued to say over the last several weeks that I feel like Tennessee is the team that's the biggest threat to Michigan. Georgia's hanging around. Obviously, they hosted him for an OV, but really it comes down to these two crucial weekends. And I think that once these official visits wrap up, Hyder will put out a commitment date. I don't think he's a guy who wants to take his recruitment into the fall. He doesn't do a ton of interviews. He's not a guy that really loves the recruiting process. You don't see him posting a ton on social media either, outside of just his visits. I think he's a guy who's kind of just ready to get this over with. But I think it comes down, to a few things. One is obviously business. I think that his agent, Adam McCann, does a fantastic job of helping him on the business side of things. And like I said, I think Michigan, now that the settlement has been approved, they're going to be as competitive as Tennessee, as anyone, when it comes to Savion Hyder. You could say that Savion Hyder is the top overall target on Michigan's board. On the flip side of the coin, Tennessee has been ultra aggressive. They've talked business. Tennessee has a reputation for being an NIL power as well. So, these 2 weekends are going to be critical in terms of business talks, not just winning over Savion and his family, but also getting the business side right. So I think it's a big weekend for general manager Sean McGee and Hyder's agent, Adam McCann. So on the flip side, aside from NIL, relationships still matter to Savion. He's not just, if the numbers are similar, if the business side makes sense for both schools, the relationship side still matters. The fit side still matters for Tennessee. Yeah, and I think it's important to keep in mind, Savion Hyder, he's a small town kid. He lives just outside of the Blue Ridge Mountains in Virginia. I think Knoxville kind of offers a similar setting, so there's a fit there. Obviously, Tennessee has a new running backs coach, and even though Michigan isn't necessarily that small mountain town, it's still kind of a small college town feel. I do think the relationship with Tony Alford makes him feel at home at Michigan. Alford has been recruiting him since he was at Ohio State, and Savion was an underclassman, and that relationship still matters. So again, I think it comes down to just overall fit, relationships. Michigan can also sell that they're a prime running team. They love to run the ball. Even with Bryce Underwood, they're going to stay committed to running the football. And then the business side as well. So these 2 weekends, super, super critical when it comes to Savion Hyder.
Speaking of critical, the trenches are always critical for Michigan recruiting. And this weekend, Texas offensive lineman John Turntine is going to be on campus. And last weekend, Texas offensive tackle Felix Ojo was on campus. So which one do you think Michigan sits in a better spot with?
I still like Michigan as a dark horse for John Turntine. I mean, I know they made up a lot of ground with Felix Ojo, and I would say they're in Felix Ojo's, top group, top 3, top 5, whatever the case is. They are strong contenders for Felix Ojo. Like I said, Michigan's back open for business with the settlement pass. So I think that you can't count out Michigan for Ojo. Not only that, Ojo, high academic kid, great culture fit, loves the offensive line development, loves the relationships there. I think Texas is going to be really tough to beat. I think Texas is going all in on landing Ojo. I think Texas is also in a strong position for John Turntine. They don't want to let him get away. But I think there are some similarities between Turntine and Ty Haywood. Remember, Michigan pulled Ty Haywood out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area last cycle. They put together a really strong package for him on the financial side. And on top of that, Ty just, really felt comfortable with Michigan's development and Sharon Moore's background as an offensive lineman and offensive line coach. And again, I just see some similarities there between Ty and Turntine. And you could make a bit of the same argument with Felix Ojo. Michigan was actually smart this past weekend. Ty Haywood served as Felix Ojo's player host. Remember, Ojo, also a Dallas-Fort Worth area guy. So it wouldn't be surprising if Haywood hosts Turntine as well. But yeah, I mean, this is a Sharon Moore special. I mean, he's personally been recruiting Turntine for more than a year now. I've had great conversations with Turntine and his father. I went down and visited Turntine this spring, and I get a little more sense that Michigan can really win that recruitment. Whereas with Ojo, there's some cautious optimism, but I'm still probably favoring Texas in that recruitment.
All right. So this weekend, over a dozen official visits. Go check out the Wolverine for all the details. But EJ, are you telling Michigan fans to focus in on any recruits that you could see committing this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, there's certainly a couple of commit candidates. I think they are in a really good spot with Andre Clark, a 4-star cornerback out of Virginia. Michigan has the lead on the On3 recruiting prediction machine. I haven't put in a prediction just yet, but I think Michigan could easily, win out in that recruitment. So I think he's a prime commit candidate, maybe not necessarily this weekend, but another guy that I think really needs to be mentioned that Michigan is going to just be all in for this weekend is Travis Johnson, on 300 wide receiver, also out of Virginia. So you have that Virginia trio of Hyder, Clark, and Johnson that's very important to this class. Johnson, aside from Calvin Russell, I think Johnson's the most talented receiver on Michigan's recruiting board. I think he's the guy they really want. They are all in for him. Georgia's involved there. Penn State is involved. South Carolina. So there are a lot of contenders. But Ron Bellamy is making a big push. They're really selling Bryce Underwood. Johnson was on campus this winter. He made a visit in the fall as well. So, I think it's going to be a really interesting weekend on the Travis Johnson front as well. And like I said, Michigan talking business now. NIL agent Latish Kinsler has a great relationship with general manager Sean McGee. Kinsler represents Travis Johnson. So I think that, Michigan will have some really good discussions with him and will really sell him not only just on NIL, but also, again, on fit, on Michigan opening up the offense, on Bryce Underwood, on new offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey. So they're going to throw everything at Travis Johnson this weekend.
Can't wait to see the returns come back. EJ Holland with the Wolverine. Thanks for stopping by the Inside Scoop today. We're talking Oklahoma recruiting, and of course, fans are locked into this Bo Bentley recruitment. So I got Josh McQuistion here, and Josh, he took that visit to OU. He went to LSU the week before. What are your sources saying right now where things stand?
Probably the same thing LSU sources are telling their people is cautious optimism. Like
right.
There's no – he has played this so well and is very under the vest. And, I went up to see Bo about a month ago and really was as quiet as he's been publicly. I was surprised with how candid he was with me. But at the same time, like all the things he said, all the things he talked about, you didn't walk away feeling like you knew where his head was at. So what I have gathered from the official visit weekend is that Oklahoma – really emptied they emptied the holster. There was nothing they could have done. I know he played a round of golf with like John Mateer and Sam Bradford. That was something that happened over the weekend. I know, obviously a lot of one-on-one time with Brent Venables, Ben Arbuckle. You kind of go down the list. All the names that Oklahoma needed to kind of hit him with obviously were there. So again, I think Oklahoma, they'd still be my pick, but it's like 51-49. If you tell me it's LSU, I'm not going to be surprised.
So we talk about all this, and all this is going on. Meanwhile, the number 16 quarterback in the country, Jaden O'Neal, is committed to Oklahoma. So one, how has this impacted his recruitment? And two, once Bo Bentley decides, what's Jaden O'Neal going to do?
I think the thing that should be established is I am told that Oklahoma would absolutely be willing to take both. Now, Josh, you and I live in a real world. That's not going to happen. We know that's not the way this is going to go. But I don't think this is a situation where Oklahoma doesn't want him or something like that. I don't think that's what it really is. I think Bo Bentley is the guy who, when you look at John Mateer, you look at some of the guys that he's had success with, Bo Bentley fits his offense just so incredibly well. So I think that's kind of why he's been such a focus. But he is scheduled to come in on June 20th, Jaden O'Neal, that is, for his official visit. Now, does Oklahoma take all the steps? Do they roll out the red carpet in the same way? Maybe they do, because at that point, I kind of feel like by June 20th, they're going to know. Like either way with Bo Bentley, they're going to know. And I think the interesting aspect is if he does pick Oklahoma, does Jaden O'Neal come in? I think that's all up in the air. I think it's all in question because – Josh, I've been waiting for 2 months for this thing to play itself out. I kept thinking it would. Like, okay, once we get to this point, OU is going to lay it all on the table. Jaden O'Neal is going to do something different. It just hasn't happened. So, how it's going to play out is still incredibly up in the air.
Yeah, so if Bo Bentley were to pick LSU, would Oklahoma still have some work to do on that relationship with O'Neal?
I don't think there's any question. You talk our guys at War Chant. I know our guys at on the Auburn site. Like they've talked with him, and he was to Jaden's credit was super candid about I want a school that wants me. I want to feel like like I matter, that kind of stuff. And we know who he was talking to. He was talking to Oklahoma, like who he was still committed at the time he's taking those trips. And I think Jaden O'Neal has a fair grievance here, just wanting to know where he stands, because this is a kid that watched Oklahoma fire their offensive coordinator, could have easily backed out, could have made that step backward, and he never did it. He really stood by OU. And then, again, I don't blame Oklahoma for going after Bo Bentley if they feel like that's their best option. And I certainly think Bo Bentley is incredibly talented. But at the same time, you wonder, was he due a little clarity on this? I don't know. So I definitely think Oklahoma would have a lot of ground to make up to kind of clear the air.
Yeah, either way this Bo Bentley recruitment goes, there's going to be some Jaden O'Neal fallout. So the QB dominoes are going to start moving. And, we don't know exactly when we see Bo Bentley's commitment, but do you think do you think he makes it this summer? Do you think he makes it by July 4th? Where do you think Bo Bentley's at in his head when it comes to making a decision?
I can't help but wonder. I really thought that he might come home from Norman and just be done with it, because this is not a kid that loves all this. He doesn't, like I said, he doesn't do a lot of interviews. He's not face out there trying to be in the spotlight. That's not really his style. So I kind of thought okay, he'll just come home and make a decision. And I think if he was ready to, he probably would. My guess is he's trying to let everything simmer down, and that's something he talked about. Like I said, when I went and saw him about a month ago at Salina, was, I don't, I don't want to rush into anything. I definitely want to kind of step back from my visit, make sure I'm not kind of caught up in the moment. And so I think that's what he's doing, and he's talking with his family. From what I've gathered, a lot of the family is, there's some Oklahoma fandom within that family. So, like, I get the impression that would favor Oklahoma, but at the same time, Bo's getting to make this choice himself. So, again, it's really tough to read. Like, this is one of the tougher recruitments I can remember, just kind of guessing where his head's at.
All right, this weekend, Oklahoma only has one official visitor on campus. Meanwhile, programs like we just talked Notre Dame, they have 21 official visitors this weekend. Is there a big visit weekend for Oklahoma before the summer ends?
Yeah, their last one, and this is something, that Oklahoma's done dating back to Lincoln Riley. They call it the Champ U Barbecue. Mm-hmm. They're going to do it on June 20th. Like I said, Jaden O'Neal should be there. Jordan Clay, Craig Dandridge, Zach Turner, some of their wide receiver targets that are still very much in play. And I think probably the biggest name from a national perspective is Jake Krull, the big defensive lineman from IMG that I think everybody kind of keeps waiting for OU to fade on him, and it just hasn't happened. Like, he is a guy that seems very high on OU. He's got a great relationship with Miguel Chavis, Oklahoma's defensive ends coach. And I mean, Josh, I think he's going to end up at Oklahoma, and I kind of am shocked I'm saying that with some of the other things we're seeing Oklahoma go through in recruiting right now.
All right. Well, Sooner fans, chime in. Where do you guys think Bo Bentley is going to end up? Let us know. Comment section below. Let's talk a little Notre Dame recruiting. As Irish fans, recruiting ebbs and flows, and recently they've suffered a couple losses, Mike, but this weekend, we have a monster official visit weekend, 21 official visitors this weekend. Is this really the start of Notre Dame's summer recruiting?
Yeah, I mean, last weekend, Notre Dame had their big, events for the 2027 and 28 classes. And, I mean, Josh, Notre Dame has had 0 official visitors on campus yet. So, Thursday night when these kids come to town and then spend the weekend in South Bend, this is it for Notre Dame. They've built a really nice class. It's in the top 5 right now in the On3 industry ranking, but you have some huge targets for Notre Dame coming in. So yeah, you had a couple defensive line losses this week, but other schools have had 2 OV weekends already. Notre Dame's not landing new commitments right now, but they are about to get their turn.
All right, let's get into these 21 official visitors. Of course, some of these guys are already committed, so you're going to have a little help when it comes to recruiting, with peer-to-peer recruiting with some of these committed players. But who are the headliners this weekend, Mike?
So 12 of Notre Dame's 16 commitments on campus this weekend. Wow. And yeah, so they're definitely recruiting, and that, that's the quarterback commit, offensive line. So it's a big deal, especially on the offensive side of the ball. And Notre Dame has some huge ones coming to campus. And Caden Finley, Josh, every time I talk to you, I feel like we talk about these two guys. Caden Finley, the wide receiver from Texas, and Joey O'Brien, the elite two-way athlete from Pennsylvania. Joey O'Brien's, of course, announcing his commitment next weekend, which is a huge deal. Notre Dame needs to land him at all costs. And Caden Finley coming off the board July 4th. So we're looking at Notre Dame versus Texas for Finley, with A&M kind of as another factor. And then, of course, for O'Brien, Clemson, Notre Dame, Penn State, and Oregon being his 4 finalists. 2 tight end targets coming to campus, and Preston Frizel and Evan Jacobson. Huge offensive tackle target, Grayson McHugh, a teammate of Joey O'Brien's at LaSalle College. I mean, Kari Adams is like a borderline 5-star guy, the cornerback from Loyola Blakefield, Maryland. And now I'm just now getting to him, an absolute monster target for the Irish. Braden Robinson, a speedster from Texas at the receiver position. North Carolina safety Nick Reddish, and Larry Fitzgerald's son, Devin Fitzgerald, from Phoenix Brophy Prep. Which Notre Dame's had some good success recruiting at that high school. Ben Morrison went there, 2nd-round pick in this past draft. So, yeah, huge weekend of recruiting for Notre Dame. And let me add this real quick. Notre Dame receiver commit Dylan Faison just had a Miami offer in the past week. Thomas Davis Jr., the linebacker pledge, just officially visited Georgia at the end of May. So it's key for a couple of these official visitors, too, to make sure they're locked in.
Yeah, and let's go back to Joey O'Brien and Caden Finley, because we do talk about them so much when it comes to the Irish. We know they are at the top of the board. But over the last couple of weeks, we've seen them take all these visits. Is it hard for Notre Dame fans to just kind of sit back and watch O'Brien and Finley just gush and rave over all these other schools before getting back to South Bend?
It's funny because last year, Josh, it was a little bit flipped for how Notre Dame did OVs. They front loaded. It was like the first 2 weekends they did a ton and then didn't at the end. So it's like Notre Dame's not getting the last visit. This year it's the opposite. They're doing June 13th and June 20th with, I think, one midweek visitor next week, maybe a couple. We'll see where things go. Notre Dame would love to get Ephraim White, the Florida State athlete, commit on campus next week. So we'll see. But it's funny how that can kind of go. Yeah. But I do like Notre Dame for Finley, and then O'Brien is. Do you remember Derek Meadows' recruitment last year where it was like, man, is it LSU? Is it Bama? Is it Notre Dame? Like, it just kind of seems like a different day. It's a different thing. I've equated Joey O'Brien's recruitment to Derek Meadows, where Notre Dame was in so early on the Las Vegas Bishop Gorman wide receiver who did end up at Alabama. And, you know, Joey O'Brien, like Notre Dame fans don't want me to compare those because the Irish didn't land Meadows. But it's just like, man, you really could see him ending up at Clemson. You really could see him ending up at Penn State. I think Oregon's fourth, but Joey O'Brien's a superstar. You could see Oregon. I logged a prediction for him to land at Notre Dame in March of 2024. I feel okay about it. Notre Dame sources feel pretty good, but it's just one of those recruitments where I'm sure each staff feels good.
Yeah, so, you know, outside of O'Brien and Finley, who we know will be making their decisions when they make their decisions on their own time, is there anybody else you're watching this weekend that maybe on commit watch?
The two tight ends, I think that, you know, we broke this news at Blue and Gold on Monday or Tuesday that Jacobson canceled his Auburn and Florida State visits and moved up his Notre Dame official visit from June 20th to June 13th, and then added Iowa State as a midweek OV next week. I think that bodes well for Notre Dame. I could see a scenario where he doesn't even take the Iowa State visit. You know, I think he could commit to Notre Dame this weekend. And then Preston Frizzell, who is listed at tight end, but he's just really impressive wide receiver as well. 3-star guy who Notre Dame really likes and has merged in the board in the spring. So the two tight ends, like, it's Notre Dame. These tight ends got to be coming off the board soon. And then, of course, Notre Dame would love to get word on, you know, guys like Finley and O'Brien who do have commitment dates here in the next couple weeks.
All right, Irish fans, 21 official visitors this weekend. Let us know who you think the Irish add. Comment section below.